Our main guest is Sam Dastyari, the State Secretary of the Labor Party, and he joins us now. Thanks very much for your company.
Peter, thank you for having me.
I won't put you through asking for your opinion about Craig Emerson. Let's just go straight to the issue of the Greens. Now, comparing the Greens to One Nation in terms of being extremists, really? Are they really that extreme?
Well, let's just take a step back here for a moment, Peter. What we're saying, and what I'm certainly saying as the Labor Party Secretary in New South Wales, is that there's two things that the Labor Party needs to be doing when it comes to the Greens. Firstly, we need to be taking a much tougher line in how we deal with the Greens politically when we look at things like preference negotiations. And secondly, we need to make sure we're out there, we're advocating our cause to Green supporters and making sure we're winning back some of that primary vote.
That's got to mean breaking the alliance, though.
Well, look, on the first issue, when we talk about being tougher with the Greens, in New South Wales at the last state election, the Greens Party made a decision that they were going to put the Labor Party where they put One Nation when it came to the upper house vote. They exhausted their upper house vote, and as a result, we have a Conservative coalition that runs the Legislative Council, the State Senate, which has meant we've seen shooting in national parks, we've seen draconian workplace legislation, we've seen the sale of state assets, and we've seen job cuts. Now, the Greens made a political decision they were going to put us in a basket with parties like One Nation, weren't prepared to preferences, and the Labor Party in recent years has really developed an unofficial policy of giving preferential treatment to the Greens when it comes to our preference negotiations. I'm arguing that that needs to come to an end. I'm going to take that to the ALP State Conference in New South Wales next weekend, and as part of a broader reform agenda that I'm pushing through the Labor Party, particularly in New South Wales, I think we need to rethink this relationship.
And I understand that this starts in New South Wales with the example that you've got from the Legislative Council, but it goes much wider than that. And the reality is that the federal Labor government are in a formal alliance with the Greens. Now, that doesn't need to be the case, does it? The Prime Minister is always going to get the backing of the Greens in the lower house over a Tony Abbott-led opposition. She should sever that alliance, surely.
Look, I don't agree with that. My belief is, and my view is this: the Greens are a different political party. They have a different agenda than the Labor Party. For too long, too many people in the Labor Party have been dealing with the Greens with kid gloves. We haven't actually taken the challenge up to them. We need to do that. But don't get me wrong, I support the alliance, and the reason is this: the Labor Party should operate in the interests of the Labor Party and the interests of Labor voters. Forming government is part of that, and there's nothing wrong with working with other political parties, be it the Greens, be it the
Independents. You can work with them but not be an alliance.
Well, look, I think where they reached was an agreement where they said this is an area of commonality that we're prepared to work together on. Now, I have no issue with that. What I have an issue with is, for too long, the Labor Party itself, as a political organisation, hasn't been prepared to challenge the Greens, hasn't been prepared to challenge some of their more extreme policy agendas, and have really been dealing with them with kid gloves. There's a perception within our organisation that simply because they're a party of the Australian left and not a party of the Australian right, that we should, deal with them with kid gloves. And all we're saying is we should be treating the Greens with the same political tactics that they use against us.
Well, I think this is the critical point in terms of what do the Greens stand for. So can I ask you directly, are the Greens the friend or the enemy of the Labor Party?
Well, Paul, they're certainly they're not the Labor Party. They don't have the Labor Party's interests at heart.
But are they the friend or the enemy?
They will never be the party that represents mainstream working Australian values. They will never be that party. Now, can they from time to time work with the Labor Party? Is there issues of commonality? Of course there is. And from time to time we should be prepared to work with them, as we're prepared to work with the Libs and Nats, as we're prepared to work with independents.
Now, you say the Greens are hostile to Labor values. Where exactly are they hostile? What is the fundamental core difference in terms of the two parties?
Look, I think there is an element of extremism within the Greens. And I think that element really manifests itself in two ways. Firstly, I think some of their individual policy agenda and some of the policies they promote are a bit loopy, are a bit to the extreme. But secondly, and I think this is the real issue I have, this attitude and this view they have of politics of all or nothing, this refusal to compromise, this refusal to recognise that Australian politics is a middle-of-the-road political debate, and all political parties, all mainstream political parties, need to, from time to time, be prepared to compromise for outcomes. You've got Greens sitting in parliaments across Australia that simply aren't prepared to do that. That's what concerns me, in addition to some of their more loopy policies that they promote from time to time.
Let's just call a spade here, though. Preferencing them last, if that's what you end up doing, is about smashing them and reducing their influence in the parliament. Simple as that?
I think it's more than that. I think it's about sending a message to the Labor Party base and to Labor voters and saying that, look, we're not the Greens. They don't share our values. They don't share our agenda. They're a cynical political party that operates in their own self-interest. And the Labor Party needs to be prepared from time to time to send a very strong message that this is who we are, this is what we stand for, this is what we believe, and we are not going to simply be treating this other political party with kid gloves simply because they're a party of the left.
Well, what are the consequences for the Greens if Labor does preference them last? What are the consequences for the Greens in both the Senate and the House of Representatives? What would happen to their parliamentary representation?
Look, that's obviously a matter for the Greens, and I'm not going to provide a kind of running commentary on the election.
But you want to reduce their numbers, clearly.
What I want to do, Paul, is send a message to Labor Party voters and to Labor Party supporters that says they are not our political party. They are not the Labor Party. They don't have the interests of the Labor Party at heart, and send a strong message that we are a party of mainstream working Australians.
But how can you possibly send that message effectively when Julie Gillard's government is in an alliance with the Greens? I mean, you've got this hopeless position whereby you're in an alliance with them on the one hand, yet you want to send the message that we need to put them last.
Well, no, Paul. What we're saying, and the Prime Minister's made some not dissimilar views herself in a speech that she gave to the William Institute a year ago. Now, the Prime Minister's in a different position where we are.
She said it once.
Well, the Prime Minister's governing and has a responsibility to work with all political parties across the spectrum. I'm the New South Wales Labor Secretary. I'm a ALP party official. I have the interests solely of the Labor Party at heart. The Prime Minister has to balance that with the interests of the broader interests of the nation. I think she's doing a good job there. But where we're at the moment is we have to be prepared as a political party to say these are our interests, and where it is in the Labor Party interest to work with another political party, I encourage us to do that. I think we have to do that. But when it stops being in our interest, when we're giving another political party, and look what they've done to the Labor Party in New South Wales. I saw some really good centre-left state MPs lose their seats because the Greens took this position that they weren't going to preference Labor in almost all the lower house seats in New South Wales and not in the Legislative Council. When they're making those kinds of hard political calls, when they're out there attacking the Labor Party daily in the media, we need to be prepared to say we're not going to stand for that.
I think what you're saying is that the Greens for too long have played the Labor Party for a bunch of mugs. I mean, that's essentially your message, isn't it?
Well, what I'm saying is, for too long, the Labor Party has let the Greens get away with too much, and we actually have to hold them to account. We have to expose some of their extremism, and again, I think there's two parts of that extremism. There is some of the policies that they promote, and then on top of that, there is this refusal to compromise when it comes to the Australian political debate.
But let me jump in there. I mean, I want to get to some of these policies that you regard as extreme in a moment, but if you want to expose them for being extremists and loonies, as Paul Howes has put it, it's a fair question, isn't it? How do you do that when your federal government and your Prime Minister is in alliance with them? Like, at the end of the day, I understand what you're saying about, and you've got to be careful with your words about the need that the Prime Minister has to stay in government. But she doesn't need to be in an alliance, does she, to stay in government? And it completely distorts the message both of the alliance and of your attack on the Greens for being extremists when you're contemplating putting them last, and she's in a formal alliance with them where she meets with them every week during sitting weeks.
Well, Peter, no, what we're saying is that the Labor Party needs to be prepared to have a debate about how we handle the Greens and how we treat the Greens. When you talk about their extremism, look, I think there are... I don't think every idea that's come out of the Greens in the past 10 years is necessarily extreme. I don't think they're all loopy. I think there's an element of extremism within that organisation.
And is that changed because of Bob Brown's departure, in your view?
Look, Bob Brown's departure has had a real impact, I think, on the Greens, and I think there's a real danger, and Christine Milne has a responsibility to keep the extremism within the Greens in check. Christine Milne has that responsibility, and I think there's a tendency within the Green movement to promote some quite loopy and, I think, at sometimes quite extreme policy agenda.
But what are they? What are the loopy and extreme policies you're talking about?
I just want to give you just an example from last week. Lee Rhiannon, the senator from New South Wales, the Green senator from New South Wales, has actually gone out there and started advocating that we should shut down Sydney Airport. Shut down Sydney Airport and not build another airport in the Sydney basin. So under the Greens kind of tourism policy, if you want to come to Sydney, you've got to jump out of some kind of a helicopter and kind of come in a parachute. You know, they've got I think their view on drug decriminalisation is too extreme. I think some of their economic agenda is too extreme. But I think beyond that, what worries me more is this approach to Australian politics that isn't built around this idea of compromise. And all political parties, all mainstream political parties that want to participate in Australian political debate have to be prepared to compromise. And I think the behaviour of the Greens when it came to the refugee debate a few weeks ago was appalling. It was just appalling. That refusal to budge on anything.
Well, our next guest is Sarah Hanson-Young after the break, and we'll be talking to her a lot about refugee policy, but isn't it reasonable for her as their spokesperson on refugees to hold a principled position about onshore processing and stick to it?
What worries me is this, and look, I come from the refugee debate in Australia from a kind of different perspective. You know, I was born in a small town in northern Iran during the Iran-Iraq War. I came to Australia towards the end of that war in 1988. Look, I'm very sympathetic to having a humane and as humane a possible solution to the immigration debate. But where I'm at... And
Sarah Hanson-Young says that is exactly what Labor doesn't have, courtesy of its Malaysia solution. She is lecturing Labor about the fact that it has walked away from humane policies on refugees.
Look, I'm not going to be lectured by Sarah Hanson-Young on the plight of migrants and the plight of immigrants who have come to this country. I think I'm not going to be lectured from her on that. But I think what you find is the majority of Australians want to see an offshore solution. What the majority of Australians really want to see, to put it down, is to stop people dying on boats. And we have to find the best solution to do that. I think principles, of course, are important in politics. Values are important in politics. But in the practical application of Australian politics, you have to be prepared to compromise for policy outcomes. And what worries me too much when it comes to the Greens is this refusal to compromise, is this refusal to actually be prepared to work on issues. And look, I mean, Australian political debate shouldn't be about Sarah Hanson-Young feeling good about her own positions. It should be about outcomes.
Well,
and it should be measured on outcomes.
Can I just ask you, which direction do you think the party's moving in here? I mean, I think the party's been confused for quite a period of time about how to handle the Greens. Do you think that opinion is now hardening up inside the party in terms of taking a tougher line? Is that your reading of the trend?
Well, at the ALP conference in New South Wales next week, that's certainly the proposal I'll be taking to the conference, which is we need to be a lot tougher in how we deal with the Greens. And at the same time, we also have to be making sure we're appealing to some of those Green voters that have left the Labor Party in the past 5 to 7, 8 years. Look, I think that is where debate in the Labor Party should be heading. I'm certainly trying to start that debate within our organisation. I mean, Paul, you're right. For a long time, the Labor Party has had to grapple with this issue of there's a political party on the Australian left, and whether or not how we should be dealing with them. Should we be seeing them as a fellow traveller, or should we be seeing them as another political party who doesn't have the Labor Party's interests at heart? What we saw in New South Wales was cold, calculated political decisions from the Greens with no goal other than destroying the Labor Party. And I think that the Labor Party should wake up to that message and be prepared, certainly at a New South Wales level, to take them on.
Now, do you recognise that if you do this, the Greens will retaliate against Labor? What sort of damage could they do to Labor in terms of where they preference Labor?
Paul, my concern isn't about pursuing a Green second vote. It's to increase the Labor Party primary vote. That's my agenda. And I think the Labor Party in New South Wales needs to send a strong message to the Labor base. This is who we are. This is what we believe. This is what we're about. And we're prepared to put the Labor Party interests at heart.
Sam Dastyari, this story came from an interview that we did for Inquiry yesterday in The Australian. It was on the front page. That's the issue is the Greens. We've got that front page for you now. Now, what's the reaction been? You must have had plenty of people within the Labor Party talking to you over the course of the last 24 hours since this story broke. Just reading a tweet now from one of our viewers says, Sam seems to have figured it out. Maybe there is hope yet for the Labor Party after the election to rebuild. Is this a long-term play about positioning the Labor Party? And what has the reaction been since you came out?
Look, I think the reaction's been fairly strong. I think a lot of Labor Party members and a lot of Labor Party supporters have wanted us to take a stronger view and have kind of welcomed that. And again, I don't think the view that we've taken has been that dissimilar to what the Prime Minister said in the past. But beyond that, I think there is a real challenge for the Labor Party, and particularly in New South Wales, and that becomes how we reform ourselves, how we restructure ourselves. You know, I came on this show exactly a year ago before the last ALP State Conference, and I outlined to both Paul and you, Peter, a reform agenda that we wanted to take in New South Wales. We wanted to move towards a community primary model where we let people in the community start helping us pick Labor candidates. We've trialled that. We're rolling that out. I said that we need a whole new way in how we develop policy, where we bring the trade union movement, the rank and file and the parliamentary party together. We've done that. We've actually developing the same body at a federal level. And I think what we're saying here is a continuation of that.
Well, and one of the other factors, if I can jump in there, has been this idea of maybe directly electing the state leader in New South Wales. Now, my colleague at the Australian, Troy Bramston, wrote about this. He seems to think that is something that you don't have support for in your own faction. Do you reject that?
Oh, of course. Completely. Look, let me be clear about this, right? The idea about how the Labor Party selects its leader is a really big idea. It's a big idea. And I think the Labor Party needs to be very careful when we pursue these kinds of big ideas, and you have to do it in a proper way. Now, what I've said, and what I think the party will adopt at next week's conference, is that let's set up a proper process to actually explore this idea properly. The reality is...
To make it happen, though, because sending something off to a committee is often code for killing it.
Well, no. Look, there is no doubt that the Labor Party in New South Wales failed to adequately deal with the issue of Labor leadership in our last term. The question is, what is the best way to deal with that now, moving forward? Now, there's a debate going on in the Labor Party at the moment. There are people who, for very, very good reasons, are concerned about a move towards a proper election of a party leader. There's other people that are more sympathetic. My view is this. Let's have the debate. Let's look at the details. Let's go through the proper process, and let's actually analyse this and see whether or not it's Labor interest. Now, the reality is that, you don't make these decisions overnight. You don't make these decisions on the floor of an ALP conference because of 3 or 4 speeches. We need to be prepared, just as we were with moving towards a primary model, just as we were in how we develop our policy, to look at these things in detail. That's the sensible thing to do. And there will be people who have concerns about this, so they should. It's a 120-year-old party. How you select your leader is one of the largest questions a political party will ever face. We need to give party members an adequate opportunity to explore these ideas and not rush them.
Now, on the question of the Labor leadership, we know that there have been a number of defections from the New South Wales right away from Julie Gillard to support Kevin Rudd. What's your view as a New South Wales Party Secretary on the leadership question?
Look, my view on the leadership question hasn't changed, and I believe the Labor Party, the revolving door of Labor leaders, needs to come to an end. I've argued that for a long period of time. I've seen what happened in New South Wales when we started rotating through leaders.
But it's not a rotation to go back to Kevin Rudd. It is very different.
Look, I think the parliamentary caucus earlier this year really dealt with the issue of the Labor leadership. I think there were some simmering tensions for a long time. I think there's no denying that. I think the Prime Minister won that ballot convincingly, and as far as I'm concerned, that matter's been put to rest.
Are you prepared to put your house on it, like Paul Howes, that she'll still be the Prime Minister at the next election, though? Would you go that far?
Look, I think she will be the Prime Minister at the next election.
You wouldn't put your house on it?
Oh, I have to talk to my wife about that.
All right, we'll leave it there. Sam Dastyari, State Secretary of the Labor Party in New South Wales. We appreciate you joining us on this episode of Australian Agenda. Thanks for your company.